Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 110. What can min-maxing teach us about being a jack of all trades? So, min-maxing, if you have never played an RPG or tabletop game or done an MMORPG or any of those other like RPG-based games where as you level up, you gain abilities and stat points that you then assign. Min-maxing is the concept of basically, well, there are two schools of thoughts about it. One is you are maximizing all of your advantages and minimizing all of your disadvantages, or you are maxing out on all of your most used abilities and minimizing anything that you're not actually going to use. So for instance, if you are a thief class character in a game, you would not put a ton of experience points into something like strength. I mean, you might, but you're probably not going to put a whole lot into strength. Instead, you're going to spend a lot of that into agility or dexterity. And the reason for that is because you need to be fast, you need to be able to sneak, and you need to be accurate with your strikes so that your character doesn't immediately like alert the guards that you're there, so on and so forth. So that's the concept of min-maxing from a perspective of how it relates to gaming and really where you go. What this means ultimately is that when you are working in a game, you are essentially creating or crafting your character rather, into exactly what you want it to be. Now, there's some drawbacks to this methodology and some benefits. One of the primary benefits of this is going to be when you are working with a group of people, you can really kind of specialize your class, not have to worry about all of those small things that you're missing out on. So for instance, if you're min-maxing in the perspective of you're really just trying to focus on some core key skills or core key elements of your character, you don't have to worry about assigning a lot of strength to your character because you have somebody else who's going to be taking care of that role where strength is important. As well as like, you don't have to worry about intelligence because you have somebody else who's going to be casting spells, who's going to be able to identify things. So you can really focus on the core aspects of your character. In games like WoW, MMO games like WoW, or, EverQuest, or, any of the other ones, there's shit tons, Final Fantasy 11 and 14. Min-maxing really is kind of focused on building out characters to fill out their specific role, whether that be a tank, whether that be a healer, DPS. Really, that's your role kind of crafts how you're going to maneuver your stuff or your character around for that particular type of build or role, and what you're going to do to support your group or groups that you're going to be dealing with. Now, the problem with this, again, is that if you are not playing with a bunch of other people who also have specialized roles, it can be extremely difficult to survive because now you have glaring weaknesses. You have really big holes in which you can't really fill. And you've got these issues where you'll run into a situation where you have no ability to respond or react, and you'll die, or, whatever happens in the game. So how do you plan for this? In some games, they allow you to min-max, like they allow you to really focus on that core ability. Like with Path of Exile, there's no bad build technically with the game. It just makes, if you're playing the game solo, it makes the game just a little bit harder. But if you're trying to go at it with a group, you need to make sure that you are really specialized. And this is true in IT. When we look at jack of all trades folks. So jack of all trades, master of none, that's the concept. Another way to say it is I have experience that's a mile wide and a foot deep. And the reason why this is kind of necessary, you'll hear a lot of IT guys focus on jack of all trades And when you hear jack of all trades, what you should really kind of translate that to is, I was the only one who did anything at my job. Like, I was the only one who worked in IT at my job, at my place of work, because that's what a jack of all trades is kind of required to do, or you're required to do. You're required to become a jack of all trades when you are working as an individual. You don't really have the ability to kind of focus on any core key skills because you're having to constantly flex from one position to another. You can become really strong in one thing, or you can get some really good experience in one thing. But generally, you're having to focus on so much that it's really difficult for you to become that very specific master of a particular aspect of your job. And where we see this a lot is typically at the beginning of IT folks' career. Now, there's a shit ton of people who have worked their entire career as jacks of all trades, and for those people, I applaud you. It's fantastic, especially if you've been able to like float around as that jack of all trades, and that's great. You never lose those skills as an IT person. You really never lose the ability to become a jack of all trades, because you are able to kind of float around and identify and see those problems, and you continually kind of hone those skills no matter where else you go, because you've always been in that sort of mindset. However, for those people who have started their career in a specific region or specific concept of IT, being a jack of all trades is kind of a silly idea. And the reason that is because I am an infrastructure specialist, or say I'm an infrastructure specialist. I'm not. I'm a cybersecurity specialist. But as a infrastructure specialist, you are focused on the core aspects of your job. You know servers, you know networks, you know how they interconnect, you know how to build out an architecture for your particular type of infrastructure, whether it be a hyperconverged solution or a mass distributed server system, whatever it is. You have a particular niche that you've put yourself into, and your experience allows you to utilize those skills to be really good at what you're doing. And you might not fully grasp cybersecurity. That doesn't mean you're incapable of learning it. That doesn't mean you're incapable of going into that specialty if you want. But what it means is you're really just focused on that one aspect. If you are working on server infrastructure, you're probably not hyper-focused on applications. Could you troubleshoot applications? Maybe, depending on what application it is and how you're working on it and what kind of vendor support you have. Yeah, you could probably focus on some applications, but that's not your wheelhouse. That's not your realm. You're going to be weaker in that. You're going to be less prone to solve it quicker than somebody who's specialized in applications. And so when you're getting hired, or when you're being hired by somebody for a particular role, you have to know what that role is. You have to know exactly what that role entails, because infrastructure specialist might mean something entirely different from one organization to another. For one organization, it might be, oh, well, you're going to be focused primarily on the network, or you're going to be focused primarily on VPNs, or you're going to be primarily focused on servers. And so that there are even specialties within that specialty that you kind of have to focus on. I remember in some of the places I've worked previously, we've had guys just associated, an entire department just associated for networking. So these are the guys who are going to be messing with the switches, who are going to be messing with the routers, and basically any firewall changes. These are the guys who are going to be doing all that. They are responsible for anything that the network traverses but doesn't actually manipulate data. That is essentially their job title. They are networking specific. They are Cisco guys. They know Cisco CLI. They are psychotic and have no real concept of the pain that everybody has to suffer through when it comes to Cisco, because they've been brought up in that ecosystem. They understand it very well. But toss them into an Active Directory server and they begin to lose their fucking minds, because Microsoft is Microsoft and they are wildly inconsistent, whereas Cisco is less so, and it doesn't, and the worlds don't really align. So those are examples of where you become hyper specialized and you understand a lot more. And with those people, they probably could go and support a single person IT shop operation and become a jack of all trades. But for them, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to support that. What you're going to find with people who are jack of all trades, who come from that type of specialist background, is you're going to find that they're more reliant on support infrastructure, that they lean more on vendor support. They rely more on making sure that they have somebody else who they can escalate stuff to, because they know they don't have that experience that is a mile wide and a foot deep. But what you're also going to find is that with jack of all trades, what you find is that there are more what we call Mickey Mouse or duct tape solutions to problems. And what these are is probably gives it away with the duct tape solutions, but they are small fixes that are supposed to work temporarily, but they become permanent solutions because the duct tape is now load-bearing duct tape. And this is a concept that is not unfamiliar to anybody who's worked in IT for an extended period of time and had to come into somebody else's fucking problem. Somebody has decided that there was a particular way to do something, and then everybody else just kept running with it. My first IT job, the backup system was literally a robocopy onto an external hard drive. Actually, it was a series of 3 external hard drives that we cycled out, one every day. So we were never without a backup that wasn't off-site. There was one that was in my backpack that I would robocopy to, so I would take it home and bring it back in. And then every third day, I'd plug it into the dock, do the robocopy, and that was it. It was a very manual process. No automation, no live imaging. It was kind of horrible and kind of hysterical at the same time, because if that company ever suffered a massive outage, which they didn't while I was there, it would take them a long ass time to recover, and 2, there's no testing of the backup because of how their infrastructure sits. And that's kind of typical of small business operations. A single IT man shop, the duct tape solutions basically cover all of the real problems, because the organization doesn't have enough funding, doesn't have enough resources available to it to solve the problem legitimately, or the jack of all trades IT person didn't know enough to fix that problem later on down the road. Another example I'll give is that instead of creating an LDAP login methodology for a particular application on their infrastructure, this IT person had a script that would go out and grab all of the users and create them inside of the software. And it was great until the server was updated and that script no longer worked, because the scripting platform that it was on changed something that was vital to that script, and everything fell apart. And because that jack of all trades guy didn't know enough about his own scripting, he couldn't tell you what went wrong. He just told you that his script broke and there wasn't any way for him to fix it. So a lot of examples here. Now, being a jack of all trades is not a bad thing, but again, you are a master. You are experienced in so much that there's no real way for you to gain much depth in anything. So when I'm hiring for people, having somebody who's been a jack of all trades is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just have to know what I'm getting, what product I'm getting, who I'm hiring, and what they're going to be. Because jack of all trades people tend to, before they make the switch to kind of a specialized solution, if I'm hiring for an organization that has that, making that switch can be really difficult because, again, a lot of those jack of all trades folk really rely on that duct tape solution, that solution that's just going to get them over until the next problem shows up, because they have to focus on so many things. And those people kind of, you have to break out of that behavior. You really have to break out of that technical solutions problem. And I'll probably create a whole episode about duct tape solutions and how to avoid them and all of that. But in the end, if you are trying to build your own IT department, if you're trying to build out your own infrastructure and you don't have the tools necessary, doing duct tape fixes should only be a temporary solution until it's not. And it's really hard to say when a duct tape solution becomes permanent and when you can allow it. But again, if you are a jack of all trades, if you don't have that specialty infrastructure or that specialty networking or that specialty in cybersecurity, you may be losing out on specific things. And it's one of the reasons why we see so many errors when it comes to security inside of organizations, because a lot of organizations hire people who are inexperienced in what they're doing, and they're not entirely sure how to properly secure an organization, or how to properly configure VLAN, or how to properly configure their VPN for secure communications. There's a lot of stuff here that can be attributed to this sort of jack of all trades migrating to a specialty or specialist organization, or even more so, somebody who is being hired as an IT person who was a jack of all trades and is used to knowing everything or more than everybody else in the room. And suddenly they don't know something. They now lose out on a lot of the, they now feel like they have to answer every question the best way they can instead of asking for help. And that happens quite a bit. So we've talked about imposter syndrome in a previous podcast, and we'll probably cover it again. But with being a jack of all trades, and if you're coming to an organization if you're coming to an organization where you have to kind of specialize, or you're being required to fill in a bigger role from that kind of jack of all trades scenario, it can be very difficult for you to admit when you don't know something. But what I'm going to tell everybody out there who may be a jack of all trades IT person, who maybe that hasn't had that experience in one specialty and may not fully comprehend a particular subject, it is okay to say you don't know. Now, you might not want to say that to somebody who's not technically inclined, who can't explain it to you. But one of the things that I really appreciated as a growing IT person when I first got out of that jack of all trades scenario was I had bosses who knew more about what I did than I did, which was rare. So being able to go back and ask them questions for them to answer and get concrete experience that I'd be like, oh, okay, I can build on this. That was key. Now, you may not be in a solution like that. You may not be in a situation like that. Like if you've lied on your resume or somehow scored a lead job where you are the boss who's supposed to have all the answers and all of the experience. Well, again, it's going to be better for you to say, I don't know, to seek help, to seek that support of the people around you, to get that ability to cover for your own inadequacies. Because again, if you are able to be a jack of all trades, you are likely missing out somewhere on your skill sheet. You're not going to be able to cover every scenario, because end game gets harder and harder the more you play, the more you go. And it makes it difficult if you can't group up with somebody, if you can't work in a team and ask those others for help and rely on them. So, look for that in your own organization. If you're not entirely sure of whether or not you have the experience for a specific scenario or you have the right tools, always look for help, always look for assistance. And I know I work for an MSP, so this is shitty coming from me. And, I would treat it with suspicion as well, but definitely look at an MSP as a secondary source of assistance for you. You can set up a co-managed solution in your environment where you rely on the MSP for the experience that you don't have. Because an MSP has multiple people that you can hire for the same or lower price as a full pay or full FTE, full-time equivalent. So again, look for those. Try if you feel like you have an inadequacy, if you feel like you have too many duct tape solutions because you're not experienced enough in one solution, or you there's a better way to do it. You just can't do it because you can't focus the time on it. You don't have the time. You don't have the resources. Definitely look at trying to rely on other people outside your organization to do that. Because when you've min-maxed and you are attempting to tank as a DPS or attempting to heal as a tank, it can be massively inefficient and you can have massive problems. Well, that's all I got time for today, guys. I hope you all have a great day.